Or how about the more than 1 billion people who aren't fanatical, who don't punch women, who just want to go to the store,
wait a second. Wait a second.
and don't do any of the things that you're saying all Muslims do.
Wait a second.
Stereotyping.
Wait a second.
Whenever somebody said Islam is a religion of peace, I was stunned. I thought, was that a joke or a PR stunt? I had to know the truth. Beyond my preconceived ideas, I determined to prove that Islam is not a religion of peace. I dove first into the most explosive and controversial debates about Islam.
To sort of create a different picture.
What is your solution? What is your ask?
No,
just condemn Islam?
The solution, the solution is very much what
we've killed more Muslims than they've killed us by an awful lot. We've invaded more Muslims.
I am not for more killing.
An awful lot. And yet somehow we're exempted from these things because they're not really a reflection of what we believe in. We did it by accident. That's why we invaded Iraq and put 4 million people.
We're not convincing anybody.
It's not I'm specifically telling you that I disagree with what you think.
I know, and we're obviously not convincing anybody.
I wanted to hear both sides of the debate. Particularly, I wanted to know what justifications do Muslims give to claim that Islam is a religion of peace. So I dove head first into the most explosive and unfiltered debates I could find. But what I found out didn't just challenge my assumptions, it shook them to the core. Stay with me because the final answer may not be what you expect. My name is Dr. K, a theologian, international consultant, and business scholar. I hold 6 degrees, including 2 PhDs, and a degree in theology with a distinction. This is TellMeDrK, a channel where we put dangerous doctrines under a microscope. We deal with any doctrine that is dangerous, deceptive, and harmful. If you have an appetite for such deep dives, kindly subscribe so that you don't miss what is coming. Let's jump in right away. Now, we are going in a descending order, starting with the least important to the most important arguments put forth by both sides. We begin with a statistical defense. Many Muslims argue that Islam is peaceful because of the sheer number of its followers. For example, in the Oxford Union debate, Mehdi Hasan passionately argued,
here we are dealing with a 1400-year-old global religion followed by 1.6 billion people in every corner of the world, a quarter of humanity, of all backgrounds, cultures, ethnicities, and yet the opposition tonight wants to generalize, stereotype, smear in order to desperately win this debate. And here's my question, if we're going to generalize and smear. If, okay, people say, were yesterday's attackers motivated by Islam? Big debate. I don't believe they were. Let's say they were. Let's say Faisal Shahzad, the Times Square bomber, was motivated by Islam. Let's assume, for sake of argument, that Richard Reeves, the shoe bomber, was motivated by Islam. If Islam is responsible for these killings, if Islam is what is motivating these people, and Islam is therefore not a religion of peace, a religion of war, then ask yourself this question: why aren't the rest of us doing it? Why is it such a tiny minority of Muslims are interpreting their religion in the way that the opposition claim they are?
So here the logic is very, very simple. According to Hassan, because of the sheer number of Muslims, like 1.6 billion Muslims, if Islam was a religion of violence, of war, definitely there would be chaos in the world. Him and many others attribute the violence by Muslims to a minority group that is not representative of the majority of Muslims.
Let's assume there are 16,000 suicide bombers in the world. There aren't. Let's assume there are for the sake of argument. That's 0.001% of the Muslim population globally. What about the other 99.99% of Muslims who the opposition tonight either ignore or smear? The reality is that the rest of us aren't blowing ourselves up tonight. The reality is that the opposition came here tonight not worried about the fact that me and Adam might pull open our jackets and blow ourselves up tonight because we're followers of a warlike warrior religion which wants to take over Europe and Daniel's university. The issue is this. The issue is this. Unless the opposition can answer this question tonight, why don't the vast majority of Muslims around the world behave as violently and aggressively as a tiny minority of politically motivated extremists? Then they might as well give up and stop pretending they have anything relevant to say about Islam or Muslims as a whole.
When I heard that, I said, wow, that's a good point. I think that point by Muslim debaters I agree with in the sense that the majority of Muslims are peaceful, but there's a small group of radicals, to whatever percentage. But this same small group of radicals is the one that has tarnished the name of Islam. In my language, we have a proverb. It says that a bad fruit makes the whole field to be cursed. There is another one that says, you spit all the groundnuts in your mouth because of one rotten groundnut. That logic is what many use as an excuse for claiming Islam is not a religion of peace. Peter Atkins counters.
It is the case that one evil outweighs one good many times over. For loss of life, inhibition of aspiration, barbaric punishment and imposition, and intellectual stifling cannot be assuaged by acts of hospitality, however generous. All the seas incarnadine cannot wash blood from a religion's hands by an act of piety. The evils will have destroyed a human life, as they did yesterday, and that life cannot be restored by charity. For every evil act inspired by Islam, even though the perpetrator is regarded by the rest of Islam as a deviant, 10, 100, or 1,000 inspired good deeds are not enough compensation.
If you are enjoying the explosive and unfiltered debates on is Islam a religion of peace, kindly do me a favor. Like, subscribe, and smash the notice bell so that when I upload another video, you'll receive a notification. Let's spread the word to promote peace and coexistence in the world. But when I listened to the other side, I was equally surprised because of the counterpoint that was presented. So the critics of such a defense are not actually convinced. They argue that the ideology must be judged by the text, not by the behavior of its followers, because many of them would decide to ignore it. Here's what Anne-Marie Waters argued.
But let me just say, and let's take this into the real world as we've been advised to do, let me tell you what actually whips up fears of Islam. We would take it from the top: 9/11, the London Underground bombings, Madrid, Mumbai, Mali, Bali, northern Nigeria, Sudan, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Yemen, Pakistan, death for apostasy, death for blasphemy, death for adultery, death for homosexuality, gender segregation, execution, as I've said, for this, that and the other, the slaughter of Theo van Gogh on the streets of Amsterdam, death threats on the streets of London, butcher those who insult Islam. But the point is that it is not I or my fellow debaters on this side who are causing fear of Islam. It is the actions of Muslims that are causing fear of Islam. In Saudi Arabia, the birthplace of Islam, we'll be told that's the extreme fringe of Islam. No, it is not. Calling Saudi Arabia the extreme fringe of Islam is like calling the Vatican the extreme fringe of Catholicism.
But what happens when you stop looking at followers and start examining the actual text? Muslims often argue that verses in the Quran that appear to promote violence are taken out of context.
Dr. Shabir, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
Pleasure to be on.
We're looking at a misunderstood Quranic verse, Dr. Shabir, and the one we're looking at is from chapter 9, verse 5. Very, very controversial verse. And here's how it goes. When the forbidden months have passed, kill the polytheists who are at war with you wherever you find them. Take them captive and besiege them, and lie in wait for them at every place of ambush. But if they repent and take to prayer regularly and pay the alms, then let them go their way. God is forgiving and merciful. So a lot of people who aren't Muslims who want to attack Islam point to this verse, Dr. Shabir. Maybe you can tell me what's so misunderstood about it.
Yes. When one looks at the verse within its context, one sees that it doesn't abrogate anything about living in peace. It's just talking about the war situation. And within the war situation, this is what you do. As the polytheists had been attacking the Muslims and they're not ceasing to attack the Muslims, they're doing the same things. They're lying in wait for the Muslims. Muslims. They are seizing the Muslims. They are killing the Muslims. So here, the Muslims are being told, okay, so when the sacred months are over, outside of the sacred months, first of all, then the polytheists were given 4 months of warning. From the time of the announcement, they have 4 months, within which time they could cease their hostilities, they can clear the area, and they will be safe. But if they continue to attack Muslims outside of the 4 months, then the Muslims can have the opportunity now to retaliate.
Oxford Union debate. Adam Dean explained.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My role this evening will be to present a theological understanding of Islam that the vast majority of Muslims believe and also practice. Now, Islam is compatible with violence, but it is not identical to violence, which is often put forward by Islamophobes and Islam critics. The Quran warns against an enthusiasm for war. Often, what we find is that these verses that the Quran speaks about, warning against war, are completely ignored. The Quran says, fighting is prescribed for you, though you may dislike it. Thus, the virtue of an aversion to violence, fighting, is superseded by the virtue of upholding justice. Moreover, I will also argue that the Islamic injunctions pertaining to violence, pertaining to war, fall well within our Western concept of just war theory.
So he insists that reading the text out of context is what makes people wrongly assume that Islam is not a religion of peace. And it leads to serious and dangerous misinterpretation. When I heard that, I said, that is a valid point. But critics argue that this kind of interpretation is actually rebranding of the text using the modern contextual environment. And it does not represent what the verses have always been understood historically. This context defense is modern invention. For centuries, classical scholars and conquerors used these verses to justify violence and expansion. If context matters, why are these verses still used by radicals today? That is the argument presented. In fact, many more provide different perspectives, and they show how actually the texts go beyond that.
Now, the thing is, I'm here to tell you, I, Linda Sarsour, am here to tell you, Islam is not a religion of peace. Now, I happen to have the Quran with me, and I'm sure you have yours with you, so open your Qurans. You didn't bring it? How woke are you anyway? Anyway, if you open your Qurans, those of you who did bring them, chapter 9, verse 5, when the sacred months are over, kill the idolaters wherever you find them. Chapter 4, verse 89. Good thing you're not an idolater, right? No problem. Chapter 4, verse 89. They wish that you would disbelieve just as they disbelieved, so that you may be all alike. Do not, therefore, take allies from them until they emigrate in the way of Allah. That is, if they leave one country and go to another to conquer and Islamize it. You may have heard of things like that happening. But if they turn their backs, then seize them and kill them wherever you find them. There it is again. Chapter 2, verse 191. Kill them wherever you find them. Are you getting a pattern here? Chapter 9, verse 5 does not say, kill them wherever you find them, but it does say, fight against those who do not believe in Allah, nor in the last day, and do not forbid what He has forbidden, even if they are of the people of the book, which is Jews and Christians primarily, until they pay the jizya, which is a tax, with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. In other words, fight against the Jews and the Christians until they submit, denied basic rights under the rule of Islamic law. Chapter 8, verse 39, fight them until religion is all for Allah, which means if there are other people of other religions, then you got to keep.
So even if the context can't save the verses, what about the most controversial word in this entire debate? Jihad. Muslims often point to the concept of greater jihad, the internal struggle against sin. And they argue that is Islam's true meaning of jihad. Of course, as we shall see later on, this man in this clip gives more detailed explanation of what jihad is, including the use of the sword.
But in short, jihad linguistically is to struggle, and technically it is to fight for the cause of Allah. The Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, to the person who asked him, "O Prophet of Allah, a man fights for the booty, for the money. A man fights for fame. A man fights because his kinship were attacked, so he's fighting with them. Who's among them is in jihad for sabilillah?" He said, "Whoever fights so that Allah's word is the highest." So this is jihad, when you fight for the cause of Allah Azza wa Jal.
Scholars emphasize the greater jihad is the inner struggle against sin. Armed jihad is strictly for defense, never for conquest. The Quran forbids aggression and harming innocents. But Ayaan Hirsi Ali counteracts, who herself is a former Muslim and a fierce critic of Islam. In a video for PragerU, she claims,
"Insist, as Western leaders habitually do, that the violent acts committed in the name of Islam can somehow be divorced from the religion itself. For more than a decade, my message has been simple. Islam is not a religion of peace. When I assert this, I do not mean that Islamic belief makes all Muslims violent. This is manifestly not the case. There are many millions of peaceful Muslims in the world. What I do say is that the call to violence and the justification for it are explicitly stated in the sacred texts of Islam. Moreover, this theologically sanctioned violence is there to be activated by any number of offenses, including, but not limited to, adultery, blasphemy, homosexuality, and apostasy, that is, to leave Islam. Those who tolerate this intolerance do so at their peril."
I continue this debate to part 2. To watch part 2, click on this link. So what is your conclusion? Put your comments below.